So good morning to everyone. And the topic, as you can say, that I'm going to essentially talk about supramolecular chemistry for another 45 to 1 hour. I'm going to 45 minutes to 1 hour. I'm going to take you all to the supramolecular world, where I'll be discussing on various aspects of supramolecular chemistry. So I will start with the question, what is supramolecular chemistry, where from the field of supramolecular chemistry started, and then I will introduce the concept of host-case chemistry, followed by a new synthetic strategy called supramolecular self-assembly, which is an alternative synthetic method to the traditional covalent synthesis of large macromolecules. So within this supramolecular self-assembly, I will introduce how one can use a metallic and coordination interaction as a driving force to make a macrocyclic structure. So apart from their synthesis and structural characterization of the macrocyclic structures, I will also tell you a little bit about their application, start from chemosensing to catalysis. And then finally, I will show you some of our recent findings on supramolecular material, particularly using Trojan base containing novel structure and material, including their applications. So as we all know, the chemistry, it's all about making a new molecule and understanding the structure, property, and function of the new molecule. So in general, the chemistry can be broadly classified into two categories. One is a molecular chemistry, another one is a supramolecular chemistry. So molecular chemistry essentially talks about the chemistry of the covalent bond. That means how a molecule forms covalently from their molecular precursors. Okay. So, for example, to make you all understand, I have given here the graphical representation. If you consider this as a molecular precursor, the reason I have not included this as an atom, the reason being sometimes not a single atom interact to form a molecule, whereas sometimes we will see the cluster of molecules. So that's the reason I have included this as a molecular precursor. If this molecular precursor react covalently through carbon-carbon bond forming reaction to form a large macromolecule, and those chemistry we consider as molecular chemistry. In fact, the history of molecular chemistry goes back to the 1828 when Wöhler synthesized the first artificial molecule urea from the inorganic precursor. Okay. On the other hand, if you consider supramolecular chemistry, and supramolecular chemistry talks about essentially how molecules interact each other to form supramolecules. Okay. So molecular chemistry talks about how molecules form through covalently, whereas supramolecule talks about how molecules interact non-covalently to form a large macromolecule. Okay, so if you consider this one molecular covalent molecule and consider another one covalent molecule, if these two covalent molecule are pre-programmed molecular structure, if they have a complementary binding site, they will non-covalently recognize each other depending on the functionality and directionality present in the functional group embedded in that function in this macrocyclic structure, and they result a large macromolecular structure where these particular small molecule embedded are form a host-case complex essentially with this large macromolecule, and those molecules we consider as a supramolecule. Okay. And so one of the leading proponents in the area of supramolecular chemistry, Professor J.M. Lund from University of Strasbourg, France, he defined supramolecular chemistry as a chemistry beyond the molecule or chemistry of the non-covalent bond. Okay, so when we talk about how a molecule interacts covalently, and that's considered as a supramolecular chemistry. Okay, so the beginning of supramolecular chemistry, as the title says, from an accidental discovery. So the beginning of supramolecular chemistry started from an accidental discovery of a cyclic compound called 18-ground-6. Okay. So in early 1960s, Pedersen, this is Charles Pedersen, and who is just a master degree holder from MIT, who took a master in science in chemical engineering from MIT. After his master degree, he joined an industry, manufacturing industry called DuPont Chemical, and now it's renamed as Dow Chemical. So he worked in this industry for almost 42 years before he was awarded the Nobel Prize in chemistry, in particularly in supramolecular chemistry. So when during 1960s, the DuPont industry was mainly interested in making petroleum product using metal as a catalyst. Okay. The problem what they were facing was the presence of trace metal such as vanadium, copper. Those metal auto-oxidize the petroleum product into some other derivative which are not actually profitable for that industry. So the industry people asked this Charles Patterson, who was a research assistant and then later promoted as a senior researcher in that DuPont chemical industry. And they asked him to make a metal scavenger in order to prevent the auto-oxidation of petroleum product. So the experienced Charles Patterson designed this particular linear diol molecule to use this particular linear diol to scavenge the catalytic activity of vanadium and copper and several other metal cation present in the petroleum product. So the experienced Charles set out to design or synthesize this particular compound starting from the monoprotected catechol, and he reacted this monoprotected catechol in two equivalent with one equivalent of this bis dichloroethyl ether under a basic condition. He could be able to isolate this linear diol as he expected as a major product. Okay. However, during this isolation of this particular linear diol, he also found 0.4% of a side product, which was very unique in nature. Okay. So the side product what he obtained along with this linear diol was a kind of white crystalline product, and he isolated in 0.4% yield. Okay. And two interesting property he observed of this particular side product. What he observed was when he was trying to solubilize that side product in common solvent, that was not fully soluble. Whereas he found that when potassium salt was present in methanol, that particular side product was completely got into the solution. So initially it was not fully soluble, but the moment he mixed with some potassium salt, particularly potassium chloride, and he found that the whole reaction mixture, the side product was completely soluble in that methanolic solution of the potassium salt of methanolic solution. Also, he found that the molecular weight, what he isolated, the molecular weight of the side product, which is almost twice that of the expected linear diol. Okay, so these two observation made him to understand what exactly that particular side product was. Okay. So the curious Patterson did not throw it off this 0.4% yield, and he started to analyze what might be the structure of that side product. So during 1960s, we were not well equipped with many sophisticated equipment, but those techniques which were available during 1960s, by using those techniques, he could be able to propose a structure called 18 crown 6, that is the dibenzo 18 crown 6. And he proposed that based on several experimental analysis as well as the two interesting observations, he proposed that there are 18 atoms present in a cyclic form, and that he named it as a dibenzo 18 crown 6. I'll tell you why he named this as a dibenzo 18 crown 6. And so this product he isolated only 0.4%. Okay. Of course, this was later confirmed crystallographically that yes, this proposed structure is right. Okay. And now the question is, now he has to give a reason, though he has proposed based on several experimental analysis. Now he has to give a conclusive statement how he could arrive this cyclic compound. Okay. So what he did, then in order to validate his proposal, he went back to the starting material which he used to make this major linear diol product. Okay. So what he did, he analyzed the starting material which he used. In fact, this monoprotected catechol, he prepared from the bulk quantity of the catechol. Okay, so he took a catechol, he monoprotected using this protecting group, and then later he reacted with this bischloro compound to get the linear diol compound. Okay, but what he found was, along with this monoprotected catechol, there was a trace quantity of non-protected or unprotected catechol compound present in the starting material. Okay, which clearly tells that the monoprotection was not 100%. There was a trace quantity present in that particular compound, and when you have a 2-hydroxy compound, since one hydroxy is not protected here, there is a high possibility that it will undergo in a stoichiometric manner to form this kind of cyclic compound. So the presence of this trace quantity that results in the formation of this cyclic compound as a side product, which he isolated in only 0.4%, whereas the major component of this monoprotected catechol reacted with this bischloro resulted in a major linear diol compound. The reason why he isolated in 0.4% is because the trace quantity only was present, but now one can make this a dibenzo 18 crown 6 in a large quantity or in a quantitative yield. Okay. So you can see that only a 0.4% of the side product, he did not throw it off. Because of his curiosity, he could analyze and then understand the structure, and he proposed the structure of this 18 crown 6. In fact, the beginning of supramolecular chemistry started from this 0.4%. Okay, so now he also was trying to understand why this particular compound was fully soluble in presence of potassium ion. Okay, he found later he found that the potassium ion, which is acting as a guest molecule, whereas the ground ether, the cyclic compound, acting as a host molecule. So essentially this forms a kind of host-guest interaction through ion dipole interaction between this potassium ion and the lone pair of electron located on the oxygen atom. So since this structure looks like a kind of crown, and there are two benzene phenyl system, and there are 18 rings present in the cycle, and there are 6 oxygen atoms. So he named this as a dibenzo 18 crown 6. Okay. So this was, in fact, he discovered this structure in 1960s, and he prepared almost 60 derivatives of this particular ground ether, starting from 15 ground 5 to several other large macrocyclic ground ether system. And he published 2 JACS paper, Journal American Chemical Society paper, in early 1960s. In fact, this was a 1967 JACS paper of this particular structure. So he took almost 8 to 9 years, 6 to 7 years to make another 60 derivatives of this 18 crown 6, and he could able to publish it to Journal American Chemical Society. And in fact, this was the paper which gave him the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, also this 0.4% yield. Okay, so this clearly tells that even if you get a very trace quantity of any side product, don't throw it off. Okay, if better you analyze, you may find something new which are not reported so far in the literature. Okay, so after he published this particular paper in 1967, soon after the discovery of 18 crown 6 by Pedersen, 2 other scientists, one is J.M. Lund from University of Strasbourg, France, he and as well as Donald Graham from USA, and these 2 scientists parallelly synthesized several 3-dimensional cyclic structure which is similar to 18 crown 6. So this is a 2-dimensional structure, and whereas the krypton, which is prepared by J.M. Lund, here the number 222, which indicate there are 2 oxygen atoms in each linkage, and also the sperine molecule made by Cram. Okay. So similarly to the 18 crown 6, which selectively recognize potassium ion. The reason why it is selectively recognize potassium ion, because the cavity size, which is exactly matches with the atomic radius of potassium ion. So for example, if you take sodium ion, it may not form that strong complexation with this 18 crown 6. So the cavity size is pre-organized in such a way that it will selectively complex only with the potassium ion, not with any other system. So it shows a very high selectivity only for potassium. Similarly, this krypton also shows very high selectivity for potassium, because the cavity, though it is a 3-dimensional structure, but the cavity size of this krypton matches with this 18 crown 6. Whereas on the other hand, if you look at the sperine, it doesn't form a complex with potassium ion, rather it forms a complex with much smaller cation, that is lithium plus. The reason being, if you look at the cavity size, which is very, very small compared to the 18 crown 6 or krypton. So because of the smaller in cavity size, it selectively form a complex with the lithium plus ion. Okay. So for the specific, for their development and understanding the specific structure and interaction with the high selectivity for potassium or different electrolytes, these 3 scientists was awarded Nobel Prize, jointly awarded Nobel Prize in Chemistry in the year 1987. So this person, Charles Pedersen, who received Nobel Prize in Chemistry, you can see that the beginning of supramolecular chemistry started from a 0.4% yield, and he was just a master degree holder, not even a PhD holder. Okay, so only his curiosity and his motivation and gave him the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. And within 1 year, in 1987, the Nobel Prizes were awarded in chemistry to these 3 scientists. But within 2 years, in 1987, Professor A.P.D. Silva from Queen's University of Belfast, UK, he coupled this ground ether structure, which acts as a host molecule. He coupled covalently with a fluorescent molecule, and he developed basically a chemical sensor out of this particular host case complexation behavior. Okay, so he designed this particular compound by one side of, so he attached this 15 ground 5. The last slide saw 18 ground 6, and here this is, there are 15 atom in a cycle and there are 5 oxygen atom. So this is called a 15 ground 5. He covalently coupled with a fluorescent indicator molecule anthracene, and the other side of this anthracene he introduced a quaternary ammonium salt in order to solubilize this particular sensor molecule. So to meet the practical demand, it's better to have a solution water soluble sensor system. In order to make it water soluble, he introduced a quaternary ammonium salt at the one side of this anthracene moiety, and the other side he covalently coupled the 15 ground 5 which act as a receptor. Okay, so so when you shine the light on this particular compound, what will happen? There will be a photo-induced electron transfer from the lone pair of electron on oxygen to the pi star orbital of the anthracene moiety. So because of this photo-induced electron transfer process, that makes this particular compound is non-fluorescent, where you can say when there is a PET is on, when the fluorescent is going to be switched off. Okay. However, upon interacting with metal ion, since it is a 15 ground 5, the cavity size is smaller than 18 ground 6. So because of that cavity size reduction, it doesn't form a selective complexation with the potassium, whereas it forms a very selective complex with the sodium ion, because the sodium plus size is smaller than potassium ion. So upon interaction with the Na+, what will happen? The lone pair of electron is no more available to participate in this photo-induced electron transfer process. So because of this inhibition of this PET process, what will happen? There will be a fluorescent switching on. Okay, so when the PET is on, fluorescent is off. When PET is off, the fluorescent is going to be on. Okay, so by quantifying the fluorescent changes with respect to the amount of sodium ion added to this to the stoichiometry, to the sample solution, and he could be able to quantify the concentration, total concentration of sodium ion that actually quench the total fluorescence of this particular sensor molecule. Okay, and in fact he published this work in Chemical Communication in the year 1989. Within 2 years after the Nobel Prize was awarded to 3 supramolecular chemists. So Professor A.P.T. Silva, in fact, he is my academic grandfather. He was PhD supervisor of my postdoctoral supervisor. He is from Sri Lanka, but he is currently working. He is an emeritus professor in Queen's University of Belfast, UK. And it was, I had a great opportunity to interact with him almost every week once in Ireland during my postdoctoral stay. So Professor A.P.T. Silva, after he published the work in Chemical Communication, and he did not stop after this. What he did, he developed a practically useful sensing device to quantify the concentration of electrolytes present in our blood sample. Okay, so he basically made this kind of cassette. What he did was he functionalized this receptor site with different cavities. Okay, so start from 15 ground 5, which selectively form complex with the sodium ion, also 18 ground 6 that forms selective complex with the potassium ion. And if you expand the cavity size, one can tune the selectivity for particular metal cation. For example, if you want to selectively quantify concentration of calcium, you may need to have the cavity size more than 18 ground 6. Okay, so by tuning the cavity size, and he developed a series of sensor molecules. And what you see here, this is a cassette what he developed with the help of 2 pharma industries. And that spot, the black spot, or the small spot what you see here in the cassette, which is corresponding to each one of these particular sensor molecule having a different cavity size. So the first one is corresponding to 15 ground 5, second one correspond to 18 ground 6, and then the bigger size cavity corresponding to this, and then he also developed other sensor corresponding to the pH sensing. So he developed several such sensor. He put it in a sequential manner. You take a blood sample and inject in this cassette. So once the blood sample pass through this spot and reaches this level, then put it inside this readout chamber, and this readout chamber instantaneously will give you the concentration of the electrolytes, for example, sodium, potassium, calcium, as well as the pH of your blood sample immediately. Okay. So you can see, so currently this is being used in many intensive care unit in UK as well as many developing countries as well as in USA. And you can see this is actually marketed under these two pharma industry. One is Opta Medical, IDEX Laboratory, and you can see the total sales of the sensor cassette. And till I think 2017, which is almost close to $540 million so far. Okay, so not so far, this is up to 2007. Okay, you can see this is a very simple discovery. So he just coupled a receptor molecule with a fluorescent molecule, and he developed a chemosensor, and this chemosensor later he developed into a practically useful device to quantify the concentration of electrolytes present in the blood sample, and that you can see the market value of this particular simple translational research. So since then, there were many other scientists all over the world, where many of them were interested, particularly in designing large macromolecule structure similar to 18 ground 6. And in fact, there were many such a report, for example, cyclodextrin, cholicerin, cyclophane, octacid, crucipetrol, fluorine, and pilarine. There are many others. I have listed only a few selected example of macrocyclic structure here. Of course, there are many other reported in the literature. And so here only the few examples I have included. Okay, but if you look at all these macrocycles were synthesized by the traditional carbon-carbon bond forming reaction. Okay, but if you look at this structure is so big, and now people are using not now, during that time when they were trying to develop this particular structure. Of course, now we have a new strategy which I will explain in a couple of slides. And all these macrocycles were synthesized by the traditional carbon-carbon bond forming reaction. So as a synthetic chemist, I would say that using carbon-carbon bond forming reaction to make such a large macromolecule, in fact, you require a multi-step reaction. Okay, so if you employ a multi-step traditional covalent synthesis, what will happen? It's going to consume lots of your time. Okay, so it's going to be a time-taking process. At the same time, it's a laborious. It's very difficult or tedious process to get the final product. Also, it's going to be, since we are applying, we are following multi-step reaction to make such a large macromolecule, we always ended up in getting low yield of the final product. Okay, so because of this disadvantage, people started to look for an alternative synthetic method. Okay, as we all know, the nature is a beautiful system which does nature does all the metabolic process or biological function so precisely. Also, the structure formation. For example, the enzyme does the catalytic process so efficiently. Also, the structure or biomolecule synthesis that happen inside inside our biological systems, it happen in a quantitative yield and in a short duration of time. Okay, so by just looking at the nature, many synthetic process, people started to adopt the nature synthetic self-assembly process to make such a large macromolecular structure. Okay, so before that, I have one example to tell you that how difficult to make a large macromolecule. For example, if you look at this particular slide, you take this fluorine C60, which is also largest convex spherical guest molecule, and you can see this particular fluorine C60 was synthesized after almost 12 steps, starting from this bromobenzene. And you can see the final product. As I said in the last slide, as we are following the multi-step reaction, we are going to end up the final product in almost low yield of the final compound. As such, we have to find out an alternative synthetic method. So this is true exactly by looking at this example. If you see that the final product of this fluorine C60, which is in the range of 0.1 to 1% yield. Okay, you follow this many multi-step reaction. It's very complex reaction, and you have to follow every time purification and isolation, and it's going to be a very time-taking process. And finally, you are going to end up in getting very low yield of the final compound. Okay. Now, on the other hand, as I said, if you look at the nature's synthetic process, it happens so easily and it happened so precisely at the same time. The final product is always ended up in quantitative yield. Okay, so one such example I can say, if you look at the DNA double helical structure, as we are, I'm sure that we all very familiar with this DNA double helix structure. You can see that DNA double helix structure is stabilized because of multiple non-covalent hydrogen bonding interaction. whereas you can see the double helical structure is stabilized because of these 5 intermolecular hydrogen bonding interaction, where guanine form a selective hydrogen bonding, intermolecular hydrogen bonding interaction with the cytosine. On the other hand, adenine form a 2 hydrogen bonding interaction with thymine. So because of these 5 intermolecular hydrogen bonding interaction, or in other words, non-covalent interaction, this DNA double helical structure is stabilized. Okay. So because of this kind of beautiful structural arrangement, now people started to use in last 2 decades or 3 decades, why can't we use this nature's self-assembly strategy to make a large macromolecule in quantitative yield? Okay. As a result, so before I go into the synthetic process, let me tell you what are supramolecular self-assembly, and also I will introduce how one can use a metal-ligand coordination interaction as a driving force to make a large macromolecule. Okay? So supramolecular self-assembly, which is nothing but a spontaneous association of 2 or more building units, which results in a discrete or oligomeric supramolecular structure, which are basically driven by non-covalent interactions. Okay, whereas in the case of traditional covalent synthesis, we use a multi-step carbon-carbon bond-forming reaction, whereas in the case of supramolecular self-assembly, we use a non-covalent interaction to assemble large macromolecule. Okay, so in order to make it clear, I have here I have given a pictorial representation. If you take this particular object, 4 different objects having a 4 different shape, size, and the different color code, what I mean, different functionalities. Okay, so if you consider a building block which are different size, shape, and functionality, and if they react through self-assembly process, one would eventually going to end up in getting this kind of well-organized structure. Okay, so this is what I mean self-assembly process, and if this self-assembly happen through non-covalent interaction, then we consider this as a supramolecular self-assembly. Now the question is, what are the advantages of using self-assembly compared to the covalent synthesis? Okay, as I said, covalent synthesis require multi-step reaction, whereas supramolecular self-assembly is a new or alternative synthetic method which can carry out we can carry out this supramolecular self-assembly in one-part synthetic process. Since it's a one-part method, it's going to take very less time, also less laborious. Okay, whereas since it's a one-part process, we are going to get the final product in quantitative yield. And apart from these 2 advantages, one important advantage of supramolecular self-assembly, which we may not be able to see in the case of traditional covalent synthesis, is it's a thermodynamic self-assembly is a thermodynamically controlled dynamic process. What I mean here is that since it is a thermodynamically controlled self-assembly process, one can get the final structure which are self-healed in nature. Okay, so what I mean, you consider these 2 building blocks. Okay, the right hand side I have put here one picture here, you can look at it here. So if you just take these 2 building blocks, one is in red color, another one is in blue color. If these 2 building blocks, if they have a complementary binding site or reactive site, if you allow them to react through covalent synthesis, you may get the miscommunication and you may not get the expected final product. Whereas in the case of self-assembly process, they assemble and disassemble until the thermodynamically more stable, also the self-healed final product you obtain. Okay, the self-heal means it undergoes the self-correction automatically because this is a dynamic process. So the assembly and disassembly continuously happen until you ended up getting a thermodynamically self-healed final product. Okay, so this assembly and disassembly can happen through several supramolecular interactions. As we all know that other than covalent bond, there are many chemical interactions that we are all familiar with. Start from a very weak van der Waals force, electrostatic, hydrophobic, pipette stacking, ion dipole, dipole, hydrogen bonding, and metal ligand coordination. Okay, so we are all very familiar with this such a non-covalent interaction. I am basically an inorganic chemist, also supramolecular coordination chemist. So I am particularly interested in metal ligand coordination. Okay? How one can use metal ligand coordination interaction as a driving force to carry out the self-assembly process to make a large macromolecule. Okay. So now the question is, so what are the advantages of using metal ligand coordination as a driving force instead of using the other non-covalent interaction? The reason being, so the metal ligand coordination, so the reasons are as follows. So metal ligand coordination which has a bond enthalpy which is in between the strong covalent bond and the weak non-covalent interaction. For example, you can consider hydrogen bonding interaction or pi-pi stacking interaction. So the metal-ligand coordination bond enthalpy, which comes usually in the range of 15 to 50 kilocalories per mole. Okay. So what it tells, one can generate or synthesize a large macromolecule which are thermodynamically stable. At the same time, since the bond enthalpy, which is in the moderate range, one can reverse the supramolecular structure into the precursor by applying the external stimuli. Okay, so one can basically generate a stimuli responsive supramolecular structure. The advantage of generating supramolecular or stimuli responsive structure is that we can use this stimuli responsive structure in the case of drug delivery. When you use the external stimuli, one can break the supramolecular structure and deliver the therapeutic drug molecule at the diseased site. Okay. So these kind of stimuli responsive structure find application in drug delivery, also in the optoelectronics and so on. Okay. Also, the metal ligand coordination compared to other non-covalent interaction, metal ligand coordination interactions are highly directional, and thus one can control the geometry of the final supramolecular structure. Also, one can introduce or develop some variety of precursor by selecting different transition metal cation. One can have, just by looking at the periodic table, we can design different precursor and design a different kind of supramolecular structure. Also, one can generate supramolecular structure with the different functional properties by selecting the appropriate metal ion. For example, one can generate photoactive, electroactive, or magnetically active supramolecular structure by incorporating their respective metal center within the final structure. Okay. Also, the advantage is using metal ligand coordination, one can easily tune the size, shape, and functionality of the final supramolecular structure. Okay. So now I have, so far what I have discussed is the basic concept of supramolecular interaction. Also, I have introduced how we can use a metal ligand coordination interaction to carry out the self-assembly structure. So now the question is, in order to carry out the supramolecular structure synthesis by metal ligand coordination, we all know the metal ligand coordination interaction, when two atoms bind through covalently, a pair of electrons come from a donor molecule to the acceptor to make the chemical bond. Okay. Now I will introduce what are the acceptor, what are the donor, how one can design an acceptor and donor. Okay. So acceptor, as we all know, a chemical composite or a moiety which donate a pair of which accommodate a pair of electron from a donating ligand. As far as acceptor units are concerned, we have several metal ion if you look at the periodic table. But in supramolecular self-assembly strategy, as far as the metal system is acceptor units are concerned, only the square planar platinum, palladium, of course, octahedral ruthenium, iron, and osmium also is currently being used now. So square planar platinum, palladium, as well as the ruthenium, osmium, octahedral metals are mostly used in the construction of supramolecular structure. And the reason, so why people are interested mainly using the square planar or stable octahedral based metal center, because of their stable coordination geometry. Since it adapts the stable coordination geometry, one can predict the structure of the final product. Also, they are kinetically labile. So because of this kinetic labile nature, the assembly and disassembly easily can happen without any harsh reaction condition. Okay. So here I have given one metal platinum complex to tell you that how we use this particular system in the process. So as I said, the platinum is basically adapted to square planar geometry. There are 4 coordinating sites. Among 4 coordinating sites, and 2 sites we usually block it by ethylene ligand. So here we have used the ethylene ligand in order to limit the number of possible coordination sites, and the other 2 sites are touched with a better leaving group, which is a nitrate, and we all know the nitrate is a better leaving group because of the electron withdrawing nature. When you take this particular metal center and react with any donor, what will happen? The donor moiety will approach the metal center by replacing this nitrate because of this better leaving nature, and then form a coordination bond. Okay. So if you consider the angle between the donor approaching site, which is this angle between the nitrate, platinum and nitrate, with the angle is 90 degree, and which is accepting the electron. So we call this as a 90 degree cis, because 2 sides is blocked with a blocking ligand. So we call this a cis block, 90-degree acceptor. Okay. So similarly, one can synthesize several such derivatives having a different bite angle starting from 0, 60, 120, and 180. Depending on the selection of the building block, one can have different supramolecular structure. So now we have defined what is the acceptor. Now we have to define what are donor ligand. As I said, donor is just a complementary to the acceptor. A donor is a chemical composite or moiety which is capable of donating a pair of electron to metal center by keeping its chemical. Okay, so the bite angle, what I mean is the angle between the two donating and accepting side. And here I have given a donor molecule where you can have the angle between the two nitrogen side, which is 60 degrees. So we call this a 60-degree donor system. Similarly, one can also design several such shape-selective donors having a different bite angle. Okay, so now we have defined what are acceptor, what are donor. Now next is we need a kind of guideline to carry out this supramolecular self-assembly strategy. Okay, so what you see here is a molecular library to design a two-dimensional molecular architecture. So in 2011, my PhD supervisor, Professor Parthasarathi Mukherjee from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, he published a paper where he has described, or he has put it in this kind of table form, this as a molecular library to design a molecular architecture. Okay, so once you are ready with the acceptor and donor, so we always look at this particular molecular library to design a different molecular architecture. For example, if I am interested in designing a 2+2 molecular square, the best combination going to be a 90-degree acceptor with a 90-degree donor. Similarly, one can design a molecular triangle by reacting a 180-degree donor with a 60-degree acceptor. Okay, so by selecting the appropriate donor and acceptor, by selecting this right combination, one can also design several such a 2D architecture. So what you see here is he also published a molecular library for a 3-dimensional architecture, where you can see a molecular trigonal bipyramidal cage-like structure can be designed by reacting a 60-degree donor with a acceptor having a 109 bite angle. In order to have a 3-dimensional architecture, among two reacting building unit, one reacting unit must have more than 3 reactive sites in order to get a 3-dimensional structure. Okay, so with this now I will explain to you how one can design. I will tell you that few real examples of supramolecular structure which are synthesized basically using metallic and coordination interaction. In addition to their synthesis, also I will tell you application of few selected examples. So I have selected only 5 examples. So I will not take much time. I will make it very short. Okay. So the first example I'm going to tell you that is actually reported from myself in the year 2010. So what I did was we prepared actually a carbosol functionalized diplatinum acceptor, where the angle between the platinum, nitrogen platinum, which is almost 90 degree, and so this is a diplatinum metal center. So it's a 90-degree acceptor. When we reacted with this 2-predyl dipredyl donor in stoichiometric ratio in acetone after heating at 50 degrees centigrade, after 5 hours of heating, we could able to isolate a beautiful, well-organized 2+2 molecular structure, and this is a X-ray crystallographically characterized molecular square. And of course, this was also supported by several other physical method characterization like NMR, mass spectrometry, IR, and so on. Okay, and so if you look at this particular molecular square, where you have amide functional group, there are 2 amide functional group and 2 carbosol functional group. Okay, if you go back to my previous slide about APD Silva's chemical sensor, there also he covalently coupled a receptor with a fluorescent indicator molecule, and here we have coupled a amide based receptor, which is the receptor for anions, not for the cation, and we covalently coupled with a carbosol functionalized fluorescent molecule. Okay, so basically you have a 2 receptor site and 2 fluorescent molecule, and we were thinking that why can't we use this as a potential molecular receptor or molecular square based receptor for different anions. So we selected 4 different anions, for example, perchlorate, F-, dihydrogen phosphate, and pyrophosphate, and we use a fluorescent technique to monitor the binding interaction between the analyte, that is the anion, with the host molecule. And where you can see among different anions, we found the pyrophosphate source very selective binding affinity, whereas the other anion did not show such a strong binding affinity with this square type receptor molecule. Also, we did the systematic fluorescent titration study, where you can see the gradual addition of the emission comes from this particular square, and upon addition of the pyrophosphate anion, where we could see that the gradually increase in the emission intensity, and the binding constant were calculated from this titration study, which was in the order of 10 power 4. Okay. So, this is a second example. As we all know, the white phosphorus, which is not a very friendly molecule, when the white phosphorus, when it contact with the air, atmospheric oxygen, as well as the atmospheric water, what will happen? It will catch the fire immediately. Okay, so it quickly decomposes into phosphorus 5 oxide by releasing a substantial amount of energy. And so, because of this nature, the P4 white phosphorus is considered as highly flammable or pyrophoric. Pyrophoric is nothing but the molecular substance which easily catch fire. Okay. Now the question is, why white phosphorus is actually catch fire when it exposed to the atmospheric oxygen? The reason is, if you look at the starting material, where the phosphorus bond structure, the bond energy, which is 200 kilojoule per mole, whereas upon reaction with the atmospheric oxygen, it's going to generate a P4 O10 molecule. And the P4 O10 molecule, the phosphorus oxygen bond energy, which is 332, 650 kilojoule per mole. Okay. If you look at the starting material and product, excuse me. So the product bond energy, which is much high compared to the starting material. Since the starting material is actually less stable, upon reacting with oxygen, it transforms into a more stable product. So because of this bond energy difference, and this P4 easily catch fire when it exposed to, or when it is in contact with the atmospheric oxygen. So once the B4 O10 is formed, it further react with the atmospheric water and results finally the H3BO4, the phosphoric acid. Okay. So now the question is it possible to stabilize this white phosphorus even in presence of atmospheric oxygen as well as in water condition? Okay. So this is very reactive species. As I said, we all might have seen in movies or in sometime in real life also, the white phosphorus, once you take out and put it in atmospheric oxygen, it catches the fire immediately. So which is basically highly reactive species. So how one can stabilize the highly reactive species? I'm sure that we are all know. So we are all familiar with this. The example what I'm going to show. You see that line. This is the king of forest, and you can see this is a very reactive species or highly furious. How one can stabilize these furious animals? Put them inside the cage. Okay. So outside the cage, it's a very reactive species. You have to listen to that species. But once you put them inside the cage-like structure, and they are basically arrested within this cage structure, and they will listen to you. Okay. So this is a very simple logic. You take any reactive species, put them inside the cage molecule, you will be able to stabilize them. Okay. You can make them to listen to you. Okay. So this simple logic was adopted by Professor Jonathan Nitzsche at Cambridge University. In fact, he published this work in Science. The idea is very simple. He used a supramolecular host molecule to stabilize white phosphorus even in water as well as in aerated conditions. Okay. So he designed a tetrahedral structure which is complementary to the geometry of this white phosphorus. White phosphorus also is actually a tetrahedral geometry. It adapts the tetrahedral geometry. So in order to form a selective complex with white phosphorus, he designed a host molecule having a tetrahedral geometry. At the same time, the cavity size also matches with the size of the white phosphorus. He designed this tetrahedral structure starting from this diamine with aldehyde in presence of Fe2+, and he could able to get this particular cage-like structure along with the host molecule. And he used phosphorus NMR, P31 NMR, to characterize the stabilization of white phosphorus inside the cage structure. And inside the cage structure, white phosphorus shows a peak at -510 ppm. Okay. So within this cage structure, the white phosphorus is highly stabilized. Even so, this reaction was done. You can see it was done in water. As I said in the previous slide, when white phosphorus put it in water, it catch fire and it can finally convert into phosphoric acid. Okay. However, inside this cage structure, the white phosphorus is highly stabilized. It do not react with water. So the reason why it is stabilized inside this cage structure, because the cavity size is very small. It cannot accommodate the expected the final product. Okay. So if you compare the size of the white phosphorus with B4O10, the final product of the white phosphorus, starting from the white phosphorus. If you compare the size of this white phosphorus and B4O10, B4O10 size is much bigger than white phosphorus. So Professor Netscape designed this host molecule in such a way that it cannot accommodate the final product, okay, because the cavity size is very small. So because of this confined environmental constraint, the white phosphorus is highly stabilized within this cage-like structure. So in addition to the stabilization of the white phosphorus, Professor Nitsky, he also demonstrated the extraction of white phosphorus from capsule. Okay, so he took the host guest complex, that means the host molecule along with the white phosphorus guest molecule in water. He took it in a test tube, and in a similar study, he also demonstrated the host molecule shows a similar binding or even much better preferential binding for benzene molecule. So what he did was he layered benzene on top of this, and he shaked this reaction mixture, and he found that since the cage molecule has a much stronger binding affinity towards benzene, the benzene slowly goes into the cage structure and kicks out the white phosphorus out of this cage. So once the cage comes out of the cage, once the white phosphorus comes out of the cage, it exposed to the dissolved oxygen and finally convert into phosphoric acid because of the water present in the test tube. Okay, he used the NMR again to monitor the releasing of white phosphorus from the cage structure. Within the cage, as I said, the peak appear at -510, whereas once it is released to the benzene layer, that is a white phosphorus in benzene layer, which shows a peak at -520 ppm. There is a 10 ppm difference, and that 10 ppm difference is because of this and the confinement effect that comes from the host molecule. But once it is reacted with the water molecule, finally the white phosphorus transform into phosphoric acid, and phosphoric acid, the peak appear at 0 ppm. In fact, the phosphoric acid is used as a standard in 31 pNMR spectroscopic studies. Okay, so this study clearly demonstrates the capsule can be used to store white phosphorus safely, and also it can control its release for the chemical reaction, and it can also be used directly as a means of cleaning up highly dangerous phosphorus spillage. In general, this kind of technology can be adapted for the selective sequestration and hazardous environmental pollutant as well as organic substances. Okay, so this is a third example. So what I'm going to show, the last two examples, one is the sensing of pyrophosphate, second one is the stabilization of reactive species. The third example I'm going to show you how one can use a supramolecular host molecule as a reaction vessel to carry out the organic transformation. So we know that in synthetic lab we use a round bottom flask or conical flask to carry out the reaction, and now what I'm going to show how one can use molecular host, supramolecular host as a reaction vessel to carry out the organic transformation. So here I have selected one example that was published by Makoto Fujita from Tokyo University, and he published this work in Science in 2006. So we all know that a conventional Diels-Alder reaction, basically a diene molecule react with the dienophile, that results in generally a 910 attack. Exclusively this product forms because if you see that the bielectron density is more localized at 910 carbon of this diene, because of this electron density is more at 910 carbon, it immediately reacts with this dienophile, undergo the cyclization reaction to form this 910 attack. This is a very conventional reaction. So this happens in so we know that no other product forms in the case of conventional Diels-Alder reaction. So Professor Makoto Fujita, he was very curious, can we modulate this reactivity of product formation, that is 910 attack of this diene-dienophile reaction? So in order to see, in order to modulate the reaction selectivity, he used a large molecular cage, which is a M6L4 molecular cage. What I mean M6L4, there are 6 acceptor unit, that is this 6 acceptor, and there are L donor molecule. So he reacted a cis-blocked palladium based 90-degree acceptor, 6 equivalent of this acceptor with 4 equivalent of this tritopic tripyridine donor molecule in water. He could be able to isolate such a large molecular cage, which is overall charge is a 12 plus ion. And so this was the only product he could be able to isolate in quantitative yield, and this was fully soluble in water. Though structure is so big, but the structure is, this final product was fully soluble in water. The reason reason is because it has a 12 plus charge. It's basically ionic product, and because of this ionic substance, and this cage molecule was fully soluble in water. So he used this host molecule and carry out the same Diels-Alder reaction within this cage molecule. He used this as a, instead of just a normal round bottom flask or the conical flask which we use in the conventional reaction lab, he used this as a host molecule or a reaction vessel to carry out this Diels-Alder reaction. Okay. To his surprise, what he found, he took a host molecule and formed a host case complex with the diene-dienophile at 25 degrees centigrade. It forms a very efficient, stable host case complex, and upon heating at 80 degrees centigrade, he found that the final product, what he observed, was completely different from the traditional product. Okay, what he isolated, that is a completely different product, that is unusual regioselective product, which is a SYN-1,4 adduct forms within the cage-like structure, whereas outside of the cage it forms selectively the 9-10 adduct, whereas inside the cage it selectively forms SYN-1,4 adduct. And the reason why it selectively forms SYN-1,4 adduct, so he could able to, fortunately he could able to get the single crystal structure of both the host case complex as well as the final product with the host molecule, where you can see in the case of host case complex, the diene and dienophile are arranged in such a way that in the case of conventional method, as I said, the 9-10 product it forms because of the electron density more localized on carbon 9 and 10. Whereas if you look at the host molecule, though electron density is located at the carbon 9 and 10, but if you look at the dienophile double bond and diene double bond, which is the dienophile double bond, which is very close or is placed in a close proximity to the 1,4 position of the carbon of this diene molecule. Okay, so see, because of this confinement effect that comes from the host molecule, because of this confined cavity effect, the dienophile is placed in such a way that it can react only with the 1,4 position of the carbon, not with the 9-10 product. Okay, so once, because of this confinement effect, once you heat up the sample, host case sample, it immediately gives out this SYN-1,4 adductive product within the host molecule. The reason also, so the reason why it forms a SYN, why not the trans? Because the cavity size is very small, it cannot form a trans product. It forms only the SYN product, SYN-1,4 adduct. Okay. He also demonstrated the effect of different substituent present on the 9th position of this diene molecule on the overall yield of the final product. He found that when he introduced the bulky substituent, that is carboxylic acid compared to cyano or ethylene, he found the yield of the product was enhanced when carboxylic acid was introduced at the 9th position of the diene molecule. So you can see it's a very simple finding. He took a well-known Diels-Alder reaction, he carried out inside the supramolecular host molecule, and he could able to generate a completely unusual product formation, and he could able to publish this work in Science. So I'm going to show you the fourth example. I have only one more example. After that, I will stop. I will not take much time. So sorry if there are any delay. Okay. So so what I'm going to show now here is how one can use the supramolecular host molecule to sense the chemical explosives. Okay. So we all know that nitro-containing compounds such as the TNT and picric acid, which are considered as a secondary chemical explosive compound because of this electron withdrawing nature of the nitro group. And so also, so this is picric acid and TNT, they are extensively used as a chemical explosive because of their inexpensive synthesis, also the easy transportation. In fact, the commercially available chemical explosive is called tritonol, which is a mixture of 80% TNT and 20% aluminum powder. Apart from the explosive nature, picric acid is, because of this strong yellow because of its highly intense yellow color nature, the picric acid used as a yellow pigment in dye and leather industries. So apart from the explosive nature, there are several health related issues. For example, if you are exposed to the vapors of TNT picric acid, you may experience or get this cataract or severe headache. It's an unbearable headache. When you exposed to the longer duration of to these vapors of this analyte, you may end up getting anemia or neurological damage. And recent study shows that you may also end up getting the cancer. Okay. Also, the Environmental Protection Agency has given the allowed limit of the TNT and picric acid in groundwater, which is a 2 nanogram per ml. Okay. So because of these several health as well as explosive nature, we used our supramolecular host molecule to sense this chemical explosive. So in 2012, I synthesized a tetrascopic tetragonal prismatic structure, starting from a pyrene containing tetraplatinum acceptor with a linear with a clip type dipyradial donor, which results in the exclusive formation of a tetragonal prismatic structure, where you can see that above and below panel of this particular tetragonal prism is occupied by the electron-rich pyrene molecule. Also, it has a confined internal cavity. So we anticipated that it may be the best sensor molecule or host molecule to accommodate the bioelectron deficient picric acid and TNT within the host molecule. So again, we use a fluorescent technique to monitor the binding interaction between the explosive with the host molecule. And we found that upon adding the gradual increase in the concentration of TNT, the initial emission intensity that comes from this particular host molecule was gradually quenched upon increasing the concentration. This is a visual color change. The initially the host molecule is highly fluorescent, and later it actually so upon adding the TNT, it completely quenched, and the binding constant were in the order of 10 power 5. And we also found it shows a very selective binding affinity for picric acid and TNT, whereas other potentially competing analyte did not show any such a strong binding affinity. So to demonstrate the practical use of this particular tetragonal prismatic structure, we also made a thin film of this structure on the glass plate. This is a SEM image of the glass plate, and it looks like a highly porous structure. And we anticipated that it can also show a selective binding towards the TNT, and we can see the thin film when we expose to the saturated vapors of nitroaromatic analyte, we found that a gradual quenching of the intensity. Also, the sensing process we could able to reverse by just washing out the film with water. Okay. So though it shows a very selective binding affinity towards a nitroaromatic compound, but the one problem with this particular host molecule, it shows a very stoichiometric binding affinity. That means since it has a 1.41 cavity size, it can accommodate only the 2 equivalent of the host molecule. As such, that because of this stoichiometric binding, the sensitivity of this particular compound was very low. So in order to overcome the sensitivity problem, we designed an infinite coordination polymer particle. So we foresaw that when you connect the fluorescent molecule through non-covalent interaction into infinite network structure, so because of this long-range electronic communication that exists in the polymeric structure, one would expect high sensitivity for polymer-based system than the discrete host molecule. So by keeping that in mind, we designed this tetracarboxylic acid containing a Troger-based functionality, where upon shining the light, there will be intramolecular charge transfer transition from this electron-rich side to the electron-deficient imide side. So because of this ICD process, the polymer as well as the initial starting material going to be fluorescent. Of course, the polymer is a highly fluorescent because of this long-range electronic communication. So where you can see this polymer emission comes from the polymer, this emission comes from the ligand. The polymer emission intensity is much high, that is due to the fact that long-range electronic communication. And the fluorescence sensing study shows that strong binding affinity for nitroaromatic, also very selective binding affinity for phenol containing nitroaromatic. Why it shows very selective for hydroxy containing nitroaromatic? Because the hydroxy group forms a hydrogen bonding interaction with this nitrogen lone pair of electron. Because of this hydrogen bonding, there won't be any ICD process that results in the quenching of the fluorescent intensity. So we also demonstrated other different parameters or characteristic of this sensing process, where we can see that it shows a very fast response time. Within a minute, we could see that almost 90% quenching effect. The sensitivity detection limit was found in the range of parts per billion. Also, we could able to regenerate this particular system. So this can be used. This particular polymer can be used as a potential material or supramolecular material for discriminative sensing of explosives in water. So we subsequently also prepared a lightweight. So here this is the metal containing polymer. So we also prepared a covalent organic polymer. Here we did not introduce. So another one more, I have one more example. So where there also I will show the non-metal based example. So here it is a purely carbon, hydrogen and oxygen nitrogen based system, and as a result what we get, the gravimetric density of the final product is going to be very less. And this is a SEM image of this polymer. This was synthesized by taking this monomer triamine. We reacted with this methoxymethane in presence of acid, and since it's a highly porous, we used this, and we have seen that Trogar base forms a selective hydrogen bonding interaction with the hydroxy group. We anticipated that it will also show a selective recognition with the picric acid and shows a enhanced uptake capacity. As we expected, indeed, this particular polymer shows a high uptake capacity. This is a visual color change. We took a picric acid, put it in water, and in water it is highly soluble, it shows a yellow color. And once you put the polymer, the yellow color was completely decolorized, and within 60 minutes, we could be able to see 90% uptake of picric acid within this polymeric structure. So this absorption also we found that it's highly reversible. By tuning the pH of the medium, we could be able to reverse this reverse the binding, and after washing with the water, subsequent washing with the water as well as the methanol, we could be able to reverse the uptake capacity, and in fact we could see that till 5 cycle we could regenerate the uptake capacity almost close to 80%. So very recently, in last 2019 December, we published a paper in Chemical Communication. Here what we have designed, we designed a nitrogen-rich supramolecular covalent organic polymer. The reason why I call this as a supramolecular, because of this strong pipette, this 1,8-naphthalide moiety, which will undergo a very strong pipette stacking interaction. So because of this strong pipette interaction, this covalent organic polymer, I call this as a supramolecular organic polymer because of the strong polymer interaction, because this polymer interaction control the molecular organization in the final product. So this polymer was synthesized by taking this triamine, which is a rigid triamine compared to the previous example. This triamine is a flexible one, whereas this is a rigid triamine. We reacted this triamine with this anhydride and got this particular polymer in quantitative yield. And this is a ACM image of this particular polymer. So to our surprise, what we found, we took this polymer and put it in different organic medium. We found this start from non-polar to highly polar solvent. We found that this polymer shows a completely discriminative fluorescence sensing characteristic for different organic medium. Where you can see the 1,4-dioxane, the polymer in 1,4-dioxane shows a very strong emission intensity compared to all the other organic medium, whereas THF also it shows a moderate fluorescent enhancement. So we kept water as a reference compound and calculated the number-fold emission enhancement. We could see that it's almost 44 times more emissive. The polymer is more emissive, 44 times more emissive in dioxane than water. Also, the sensitivity was in the range of parts per million. So we could also see the sensing process, which is highly reversible, and we also made the thin film of this polymer and exposed to the vapors of 1,4-dioxane in solid state also, or in the vapor phase also. We can use this polymer to sense selectively 1,4-dioxane. So these results demonstrate that this polymer can be a potential sensor both in solution as well as in the vapor phase for discriminative sensing of volatile organic compound. So with this, I will stop by thanking my group member at IIT Palakkad. I have a very dynamic and very active research team. They are very hardworking students, and so these, so here Ms. Binduja and Anand. So these two are my PhD students, and I have a postdoc, and then there are other few group members. They are not part of this picture. Also, I thank IIT Palakkad for financial support as well as the facility, and then ACRB for the financial support, as well as the IRIS Research Council for the generous research funding. So I thank you all and for listening to me. And so if you have any question, I'm